Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Caboose XB. I'll bring you another Injustice 2 video, and today we're going to be doing is another round of questions and answers. I've picked out some new questions this week for Injustice 2. For some of you who might be new to this series, all you got to do is send in your questions related to Injustice 2 or Spider-Man PS4, whether that's in the comments of this video, on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you would like. Just make sure to include Q&A in your message. That way I know you are looking to be a part of this series and not just sending in a question that you'd like me to maybe answer in the comment section or something like that. So with all that said, let's move on to the first question that we have today, coming from YouTube, and that is from Azrael Animation, and they say Q&A. So, Caboose, what would you say if Injustice 2 would include characters from Image Comics, which are now owned by DC, such as Grifter, Spartan, or Maul? Now, those are all fantastic suggestions, but for me, if they were to include any characters from Image Comics, at the tippy top of my list is Grifter, for sure. I love Grifter. He has such an awesome design as a character. He is so cool. Yes, he kind of shares a similar style to some other DC Comics characters, one of which we are going to get to later on in this video. But I think if NetherRealm were to take that character, put him in Injustice 2, they can add his own spin and his own uniqueness to the character. It could definitely be cool with the gear system, how you can create Grifter and make him look different. So yeah, Grifter is definitely a character from Image Comics that I would love to see in Injustice 2. But yeah, Image Comics being owned by DC now means that some of the possibilities are fairly endless for NetherRealm to include those characters in Injustice 2. So thank you for your question, Azrael Animation. Now moving on to the next question, also coming from YouTube, and this is from Asian Persuasion 9001, and they say Q&A. Caboose, after year 5 in the Injustice comic book series, do you think we will have returning characters in the first game, but with much different abilities? A great example would be Dick Grayson, now Deadman. Now, for those of you who have read the Injustice comic books, the ones that are like year 1 to year 5, which lead up to the events that happen in the Injustice video game, Injustice Gods Among Us, that is, you would know that Nightwing, Dick Grayson, actually bites the dust and he actually dies. It is such a crazy death. It is so bizarre, but I think it's really well written, and it's one of the better moments that happen in the Injustice comics simply because of the way that Batman handles it and the way that it's carried on into the Injustice video games. For those of you who know what happens, you know what I'm talking about. But basically, what ends up happening down the road in the Injustice comics is that the character of Dick Grayson, who is now dead, becomes the character Deadman, who is another DC Comics character in its entirety. Now, I don't know too much about Deadman, but from my understanding, that is like a persona that is kind of passed on from character to character, and I'm guessing it is a persona that is passed on to dead characters, of course, with the name Deadman. I do believe this was a character that had a major role in the Blackest Night and Brightest Day runs from the comic books, also written by the master Jeff Johns. But to answer your question, well, that would be interesting, because for the most part, what NetherRealm likes to do with the comic book series and the video game when it comes to Injustice is they kind of let them be their own separate entities with connective tissue. Like I mentioned, you know, Nightwing's death has quite a substantial part in Injustice Gods Among Us, specifically being a moment between Damian Wayne and Batman. But for the most part, you don't get a lot of context and you don't get a lot of connective tissue from the comics to the video game, because NetherRealm knows, and same with the writers of the comic books, that the people who are watching or playing those different mediums won't be watching or playing the others. So, you know, people who are playing the Injustice game aren't necessarily going to be reading the Injustice comics, and the people reading the Injustice comics aren't necessarily going to be playing the Injustice game. So they have to know that, and with that knowledge, they have to make these things be their own entities with connective tissue. You know what I mean? It's a really sticky situation, so I'm not sure entirely if they're going to include Dick Grayson as Deadman to be a playable character in Injustice 2, but I gotta be honest, I would be all for that if that were to ever happen. So thank you very much for your question, Asian Persuasion. Moving on to the next question. This is coming from Twitter. I don't even know who this guy is or why they're tweeting me, but it's this guy named like Uncaged Games or something. Terrible name. Anyways, their question is, if you had a choice on what Green Lantern got to be in the game, which one would it be? Doesn't matter if they died. Now, that's a great question for somebody with an absolutely horrendous name here. Now, to answer your question, although I do love the original Green Lanterns, you know, your Hal Jordans or your John Stewarts, right now, the one Green Lantern that I'm loving the most from the comic books because of the way his character is being handled and the message that the character is sending is Simon Baz. Simon Baz is one of the newer Green Lanterns that have been recently introduced into DC canon, and he is such an awesome character, and I would absolutely love to see him in Injustice 2. I don't see the highest possibility for it, but I would be extremely enthusiastically surprised if he were to be introduced in Injustice 2. Hell, if he were to be some sort of alternate costume that you can wear for Green Lantern, that would be awesome too. Like I said, I love Hal Jordan and John Stewart and all the original Green Lanterns that we got from the comics way back in the day, but right now, Simon Baz has got to be my favorite. If not for Simon Baz, to add some more diversity and to have a female character, an additional female character into the roster, Jessica Cruz would also be a Green Lantern that I would love to see in Injustice 2. She is doing great in DC Rebirth right now. Her and Simon Baz bounce off each other extremely well. So hell, seeing those two characters in the game would be an absolute treat, although I don't see a high possibility for it. But as your question states, if I were the one who would have a choice on this, Simon Baz is my number one pick. If not, Jessica Cruz is my number 2 pick. So thank you for your question, Uncaged Games or whatever your name is. Moving on to the next question we got here is coming from Andrew Codill. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I probably am. Please correct me if I am. And the question is Q&A. How do you think the currency system will work in the game? Well, to answer your question, assuming that there will be a currency system in the game, which I think it is fair to assume that there will be, considering what we got in MKX and considering that you can use the currency to buy gear and stuff, I'm going to assume that it'll be very similar to MKX. You know, if you win a game, you get a lot of coins. If you lose a game, you get some coins. If you play through the story, you'll gradually get a bunch of coins and so on and so forth. So I'm assuming that's basically how it's going to work. You get all these coins and then inevitably you can save them all up and get a really legendary piece of gear or something like that. The only unfortunate side to this, if there is going to be a currency system in Injustice 2, is that this is a very easily manipulated system to add microtransactions to the game. So we're just going to have to wait and see how everything works out. Although, if a currency system is added into Injustice 2, it will make the game have a fun grind feel to it so that you can grind to get some awesome gear and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for your question, Andrew. And moving on to the last question coming from YouTube, and this is from Smashy Red Panda, and the question is Q&A. Since Red Hood is pretty much confirmed, do you think Jason will have Arkham Knight gear? Now, here's the thing. Assuming that Red Hood is confirmed and he will be in Injustice 2, which again I think is a fair assumption to make considering all the hinting that's been done and considering how he has been the highest recommended character to be in Injustice 2, even in Injustice 1, I think without a shadow of a doubt that there will be Arkham Knight gear for the character. You know, it's definitely no secret that NetherRealm has worked with Rocksteady before or have added Batman Arkham related content to the Injustice games. You know, with Injustice 1, we had the Arkham City skin pack where you can get Arkham City costumes for Batman, Catwoman, and the Joker. There was also a bunch of Arkham game models in Injustice 1. You had Scarecrow in there, Killer Croc, Hugo Strange, Penguin, Two-Face, so on and so forth. So plenty of Rocksteady Batman Arkham stuff has been in the Injustice games. The Injustice mobile game has had plenty of Batman Arkham stuff. The Arkham Knight being a playable character that you can get in the mobile game. So I definitely see, if Red Hood is confirmed, that is, him having Arkham Knight gear to make the character look like the Arkham Knight, which would be so freaking cool. The Arkham Knight design is too cool to just be used in one game only. So to see that in Injustice 2 would definitely be a treat, considering the assumption that Red Hood is confirmed for Injustice 2, which is all but what we know right now for Injustice 2. So with all that said, that concludes our episode of the Q&A series this week. Once again, if you'd like to leave your questions for another episode of this series, you can leave them in the comments of this video on my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you'd like. Just make sure they're centered around either Injustice 2 or Spider-Man PS4, and make sure to include Q&A in your message so that you can be a part of the series. With all that said, I'm CaboosXBL. Please follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a comment if you have an opinion, and subscribe if you're new. See you guys later.